Thank you all so much for being here for TattdTalks Pride Edition. Thank you so much for celebrating Pride with me and with Tatted. And I'm super excited to have this discussion. And each and every one of you are such incredible people and such incredible artists. And I know that our entire audience and everyone that sees this is just going to be out of their minds, excited to hear from you. So again, thank you so much. So we have a lot to get into, but first, obviously, I want to do intros. And I know we're all over the country. We got Oakland, we got LA. I know we got New York. I mean, I'm up in Brooklyn. Jar, you're in the Bronx, I think. Yeah. So we're East Coast, we're West Coast, which is cool. So if you'll introduce yourself and let me know where you're calling in from. And also just a tidbit about yourself. If you want to give a fun fact, if you want to give something about your artwork, whatever it is, just something to kind of get to know you a little bit better. Jar, if you want to start.
Sure. So my name is Jar. I'm from the Bronx. And fun fact, I would say I'm really obsessed with llamas. It's kind of weird, but like I just collect random llama shit. Like I have, so a lot of my clients always randomly like give me llama stuff. And in terms of tattooing, I specialize in like line work and watercolor. And yeah, that's about it.
I love it. Thanks so much. Do you want to go next, Ren?
Oh yeah, I'm Ren, originally from Chicago, but I live in LA now. I'm currently in Oakland, so I'm in the area trying to figure out. I thought I was in San Francisco, but I guess it's two different places. I didn't know that. Do not know my geography, but we're here. Let's see. I am a drag performer outside of tattooing. Been doing drag since I was a kid. Have taken a hiatus for COVID just because drag has kind of moved online during this time. And one of the big things that I love is just performing in front of people. So during this time, I've been really focusing on tattooing. I think I like specializing, I think, line work, and I really love doing like risographed pieces and making them look just like off-centered. A lot of red, a lot of black. So
amazing. I love it. Rocio, you want to go?
Yeah, my name is Rocio. I go by Wolf, and I've been tattooing since I was 21. I'm 45. I live in Oakland, California. And when I was learning how to tattoo, I was also a bike mechanic. So that is actually how I got myself through COVID, by working at a bike shop while this was all going on. So here we are. Yeah.
I love that's pretty badass. I've not heard of that one. That's awesome. All right, thanks. But you prefer Wolf?
Yes.
Amazing. All right, good to know. Fantastic. So let's jump in. As you already know, for the first little bit, I do want to talk about y'all's personal experiences, right, in the industry as an LGBTQ member. And then kind of want to move on to like a little bit more macro level, a little bit more industry at large. What are we doing? I think we lost Ren for a moment. But so first of all, and again, all this is open forum, so jump in as you feel comfortable. What was it like for you entering the tattoo industry, right? So your sort of earliest days and stages as an LGBTQ artist. Were you lucky enough to feel super welcome, or did you face a lot of barriers? Was there an issue with not having role models? Just sort of what did you see? What was your experience there?
So I'll start. I've only been tattooing for about 5 years. And when I did start tattooing, I did feel immediately I felt like weird just because I noticed a lot of artists start a lot younger. So that I already kind of experienced some prejudice with my age. But I also noticed just being physically a woman and also being non-binary, I did experience a lot of bias in the sense of I had to act a certain way Um, and also every shop I've been at, it's always been kind of like trying to see like what do I know? Like it's like, oh, are you really a tattoo artist? Like what machine do you use? Do you really know how to do this? You know? And I noticed is because it's predominantly white male. Being a person of color too, that was another stigma that I had to deal with. And I did experience I experienced prejudice, like would get sometimes like the really shitty clients, or sometimes they'll have me overworking crazy hours, or sometimes even just like racial comments that they'll make in terms of like where I come from, um, who I date, you know, sexual preference, things of that sort. So it's definitely been a struggle. But I also feel like I have such a good head on my shoulders that I don't let it get to me, and I've strived to move out of the industry in the sense of not being in a shop and cultivating my own space so that I can create a safe place for my LGBT community.
Wow, amazing. Did y'all have similar experiences, Ren or Wolf?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have probably the least experience out of the group here. I've been tattooing for about a year and a half so far. I am pretty young. Sorry, my cat is getting into the snacks over here. The most queer thing is having just a cat, period. Her name is Chicken. She's over here in the snack drawer right now. Her name's Chicken. But yeah, wait, I'll show y'all. I don't know if you see her, but she is inside the cat. She's in the snack cart right now. And I'm just here like trying to look at her like, okay, all right, this is what's happening. But yeah, as of right now, I'm about like a year and a half into tattooing, and I just turned 21 a couple months ago. So I'm relatively young. But at the same time, you know, I feel like I experienced a lot of what was mentioned before about like, you know, going into an industry like this or having any interest in tattooing specifically, especially as, you know, a queer individual, especially like a more femme-leaning individual. I feel like there has been a lot of prejudice, especially with how I perceive myself and my worth, especially at the beginning. I'm fully self-taught, and one of the big things I remember when I first started out was just searching online and trying to get all this terminology down and getting all of these, just trying to figure out everything by myself because I was too afraid to ask the people around me, just because, you know, for I feel like minority status individuals, it's hard to go into one of those shops or like a traditional shop that you just walk into like a very cis male leaning, white dominated space. And especially when I mean, personally, when I go into a type of shop that has that certain type of air, I always feel like I'm on edge. I feel like I puff up a little bit because I have to know my stuff before I go in. I have to prove myself, my worth. And you always have to prove yourself when you say like, oh, I tattoo. People always ask you, oh, do you like, that's cute. Or like, oh, what do you do? And you kind of have to prove yourself every time. Obviously, maybe that will just come with age and that will come with experience. Hopefully, you know, when I'm at 5 years or how many years, that confidence will go up. But I think, you know, coming from a place where I've just start out, it definitely goes through my head 24/7. I still have to puff up a little bit and walk around like this. Just like flex a little bit.
Shops, they're very intimidating, and that's also something that my friends even tell me. Just them walking into a shop wanting a piece, they're like, it's like the vibe you get is like just straight up assholes, and like they're like, "What do you want?" Like, okay, so if you don't tell me what you want or if you don't know the right terminology, it's like, well, you don't know shit. Get the fuck out.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like it's definitely very intimidating for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I know those shops. I know those shops. Like those, it's like, it's immediate. You can tell. Like, that's the exact like type of people that you're working with.
Right.
As our vet, Wolf, how was the experience?
So I feel like I had a pretty unique experience. I started working at Black and Blue back in the day, and they're, I'm forever loyal and grateful to that shop. I own my own shop with my coworker Cedar in Oakland now. Diamond Swallow Tattoo, and it's queer owned and essentially queer operated, and we've been around for many years at this point. But when I moved to San Francisco, I moved, when I was 18, got the fuck out of Ventura and moved up here, and it was like right in the middle of the Riot Girl scene. And so I was very lucky to move into the Mission in San Francisco. You can work in a cafe and make a living, you know what I'm saying, still, or, eat the food there, whatever. Like you I don't know, it was a little bit easier in some ways to have, easier jobs. And I had an art show actually at this cafe called The Bearded Lady, and I went in to Black and Blue, which was on 14th back in the day, and I just happened to ask them if they were looking for apprentices, and they had seen my artwork next door, and they happened to be looking for artists. And so I was the youngest one that they had picked at that point. So they made me wait until I was 21, but I was talking to them since I was 18, and I still know all of those people from back in the day. But it was like, all the words and the language have changed around queerness, but back in the day it was like dyke owned and operated. And so, I became part of this crew basically at that point, and I stayed with them for 10 years. I was really lucky in that way. It was a tiny spot. It was a shit show a lot of the times, and we did the best we could. And there was a lot of like really offensive stuff. It was really hard to go to conventions. But a lot of really good people have come out of that shop, and there are a lot of really great people that still work at that shop because that shop still exists. And so, that's my experience. I came to Oakland, a few years back, and this is where I live now and where I run my shop. So that's
yeah. Sometimes I feel like in New York or in Brooklyn, and also with the people I surround myself with, I feel like I'm in this like really lucky sort of liberal woke bubble, and then sometimes I walk one step outside of it and I'm like, what is that? The rest of America feels this way? Like, I forget sometimes. Sometimes you really are lucky to like find those spaces and find those people and really have that positive and encouraging experience and community, which you hope becomes more and more widespread, right? But it's interesting, so sort of thinking about spaces and safe spaces and, where they exist and don't. Jar, you even referenced that unfortunately and undeniably, the industry still is very much sort of predominant with this white male cis energy, right? In creating a safe space for yourself as an LGBTQ artist, as well as anyone that you work with, clients, or people that work at your shop, or for other people that need that safe space. Is there a way to create that within a studio that doesn't necessarily define itself as that? Does it have to be fully separate? How do you define your own safe space? Like, what does that look and feel like?
I mean, I think just in terms of like from what I learned, at Black and Blue, it was just basic, courtesy, you know what I'm saying? Call people what they want to be called, be nice to people when they come in. That's just basic,
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because ultimately we're all just people, right? We just want respect. We want to be listened to when we have an idea of what we want on our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
They're just as a vehicle to create this image. And yes, your personality comes through the imagery. Obviously, you're an artist, but you're really just there as like an in-between person, you know. So
Right.
that's how I see it.
I agree with 1,000%. It's literally comes down to just human decency and courtesy. Because like in my studio, the way I create a safe place is like just as simple as like the consent form. Like I specifically ask for your pronouns. I specifically ask also if there's like anything that triggers you, so that I don't bring it up. You know, because sometimes there's just general shit that you don't know triggers someone. So I just want to like make sure that I respect that. But even just like, because that's the thing. At the end of the day, tattooing is it's a little traumatic. You know, like it's you literally taking a needle, putting it into someone's skin, and essentially it's like you're carving. Technically, you know, like it hurts. You know, so it's why not make the person feel comfortable. You know, like when you go into a doctor's office and you're getting surgery, the doctor's not going to be an asshole. He's going to be like, okay, well, this is what's going to happen. You know, we're going to try to calm you down just so that answer any questions you have. And I feel like the same thing should be done with our clients, where a lot of people do not know what this entails. And sometimes people are looking at my setup and they're like, well, what is that? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to explain it to you because obviously you don't know. Like, I'm not going to be an asshole about it, but it's just let me make you as comfortable as possible. And obviously, this knowledge is going to make you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So why not do it, you know?
And just
I mean, I completely,
vision as well, you know.
yeah,
Right.
I completely agree with everything. I mean, like, you know, realistically speaking, I feel like as a tattoo artist in this, like, in this exchange of art on somebody else, you are in a position of relative power. As the tattoo artist, your client is coming to you with the trust, with the guidance that you will put something on their body that both of you enjoy and like. So I think, you know, in these spaces, I've heard of countless horror stories, and I have bad tattoo experiences as well. Like, I've had experiences where I felt like I couldn't talk during my tattoo, or I had experiences where the work that I have on my body was not what I wanted in the first place. But I felt like I couldn't speak that or into that existence with my tattoo artist because I felt too scared. Obviously, as a human being, you're always going to make mistakes. But one thing I always tell my clients is if you have anything during the process, we can stop. Like, we can continue with this when you feel comfortable. And obviously, you know, with some people, I don't expect you to say stop or say something that you don't want to say, you know. It gets awkward. But I think with every tattoo that you do, even if you are like hundreds and hundreds in, you can always learn something from each session. And you can always learn how to respect a certain client. I think, you know, even talking with other tattoo artists, like Jar, what you said about, you know, on your consent form, you have a list of things that you like triggers and stuff like that. I never thought of that before. I'm 100% after this putting that in my form. That is an amazing idea. I mean, I have pronouns and like additional comments, but a little section of being like, what are you uncomfortable with? And taking note of that is such a great idea. And like, you know, you learn that through the process. And unfortunately, I don't think there's a guidebook telling you how every person is when they come in. But I think, you know, a lot of people have this misconception of like, you know, a client is just a canvas for you to put your work on. But that canvas is like, that canvas is its own autonomous human being that has its own shit that it's like we say, it has their own feelings, and each person is different. And you gotta like work with that, you know?
Yeah, I feel like too, a lot of the stuff that we're learning how to cope with, too, with the things that people say, they are not asked a lot of times as well, like, what's going to trigger you as the artist? I've had people say crazy shit to me before, where I was like, I don't know what to do with that,
Right.
And, I think also as like artists, you have to protect your own energy when you're working with people. And we are doing a lot of this, when you're a tattoo artist, you're like part therapist in a sense, sometimes like part witch. You're doing these like tattoos for people that have lost loved ones, and nobody's teaching you how to, hold space for people like that. You're doing it intuitively. And I learned a lot from the people that I worked with in terms of like, put a piece of tape over your belly button, because I think that helps sometimes with like, this is my energy, that's your energy. And it's like a very simple thing, but it kind of, helps a little bit with that, barrier. So you can still be present for the person, but create a little bit of a energetic barrier, or at least an awareness that you're separate people and you don't have to take on their shit, And I think that's also important to take care of your body, your person, your spirit, your soul, as you're doing these pieces, so that you have longevity in this. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I haven't seen or heard of the tape thing. That's great though. But it's so true because a lot of my tattoos, and now I'm feeling weird about it just because I feel like I have definitely utilized tattoo artists as semi-therapists. Now that you say that, I mean, it is such a personal moment and an exchange, and it feels very raw. And as on the other side of things, like I've always felt very vulnerable, so it does sort of create that environment, right? And it's funny, you all make it sound so easy and simple, and it should be, right? Where it's just having consideration about the human that's across from you or next to you or getting tattooed by you or whatever it is, right? It should be just that easy. And unfortunately it's not. So, a lot of times I do think about, so now what then, are we the people that are going to be loud about doing that? Did you have people, did anyone, any of y'all have people that came before you? I know you talked both about Black and Blue, and, we have some people over at that studio as well, who kind of maybe set a tone, because I think about representation, right, of the LGBTQ community in the tattoo industry. Do you see enough of that? Do you see a lot of that? I imagine you might see it more increasingly. Was it there when you first started tattooing? Did it influence you feeling safe enough to, take on tattooing? Sort of, what was your sort of like visual North Star, or what representation did you see, or inspiration did you see in the industry?
I mean, I'll start off here, but I'll definitely say I probably have an extremely different experience than, let's say, Wolf. I hear about, Wolf, your story about, just working at an art shop and just going across like next door to the tattoo shop and just like asking for an apprenticeship. That, to me, I'm in awe of that. Because, as a person who just remembers how they started out, I was too nervous of going to the shops. Unfortunately, I moved out of the city recently, or a couple years back, in Chicago, and eventually went into the middle of buttfuck nowhere, Illinois. And there are no queer tattoo shops around there. So trying to find that space that felt very where I felt seen was just non-existent over there, unfortunately. But what was great was that I think that through the queer web, as I would like to call it, I do think that tattooing and queerness are so intertwined, and tattoo and healing through trauma are so intertwined as well. And I do think my hypothesis is that it is just all connected. It's this little web and we're all just stuck in it. But, you know, through that, I think the power, I don't want to say the power of social media, but the power of social media and how it's influenced how individuals consume tattooing and consume artwork, and get clients and, you know, get appointments, and find community is so strong. Like in a time when I remember knowing nobody, it was a huge sense of encouragement. I think of tattoo artists that are like me, like queer, and Asian American, and I think of like individuals like Kenji Park, also in Los Angeles, and I think of so many people in New York, and like seeing their work and seeing that there were individuals like me out there who pursued this and were successful within their community, at least for me, starting in like the 21st century, like just starting in this like 2020, you know, it was very reassuring. And it encouraged me to like talk about it and get started. But that's Instagram. And I feel like Instagram has changed many things. I buy all my clothes on there now.
No, it's so interesting to have very different perspectives on the call. Like, I think that is very cool, right? Because, you know, you can really sense, you know, not only within one person's experience, but within multiple people's experience, the actual progression of the industry, and, you know, of the LGBTQ representation in general, which I think is amazing. Wolf, what was your experience?
Well, I mean, you know, I moved out of Ventura, Southern California, a pretty conservative town when I was 18, because I was basically, you know, suicidal and really upset, you know, at the world. So, you know, queer has always been a outcast. You know what I'm saying? Being queer, it's never been like a thing, you know, like a popular thing.
Right.
And you know, a space like Black and Blue was created, just like how many spaces are created now, with that intention of making a safe space for queer people. You know, it's not a new thing. It was done by people before us. You know, there was a generation of queers that were in San Francisco, generations of queers, but there was a generation before me, 10 years older, basically, that opened that studio. And they were like hardcore, like SM, Dykes, you know, Leslie Ma, you know, was in Tribe 8, and Asian, queer, femme, you know, incredible humans that came out of that shop. And Idexa, you know, Natalie, tons of people that came through that shop and created a space because there was no space for us. And, you know, I remember specifically one time we got sent a client that was HIV positive from you know, some cis shop. And because, you know, he had a family, so he should go to our shop so that we could tattoo him. And it's like, you know, we tattooed everybody that came to our shop that wanted to get tattooed there. It didn't matter if you're straight, white, you know, queer, we tattooed everybody, but there was always this like, send these people to them because they could deal with that. So, you know, there's always been misfits creating spaces so that we have like a place, you know. And I mean, that's, you know, that's my experience of that.
And do you see that becoming a lot more widespread or acceptable, or do you still see those spaces and safety only really being created by the community itself? Or is there any sort of bleed out to, you know, the world at large to encourage that?
I feel like, well, from what I've seen, and especially like meeting more queer artists, it hasn't really been that, you know, at these like cis dominated shops that it's still accepted. I get a lot of trans clients too that they tell me they've gone into these spaces and they just feel uncomfortable immediately. Especially like, you know, if they're getting tattoos specifically on like if they've gotten top surgery and like they don't feel comfortable explaining that to these artists. But yeah, I feel like just even in New York and like, you know, seeing places like in Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx, it's literally been us creating those spaces and those studios for our community and our people, and it still continues to be that way.
I thought it was really interesting just noticing, from when I started, used to try to get into the conventions, and it was this really, expensive thing to do, only to get mistreated while you were there. Uh, that a lot of like young queer artists, just started sort of visiting shops and doing guest spots at shops and doing really incredibly well at those guest spots and putting their name out there. And that's something that I found actually very admirable and really interesting. And the work was really, really different. A lot of self-taught artists, a lot of people doing line work, and making their way, basically. No need for fucking conventions where they're selling like fucking shirts with, some kind of weird Confederate flag shit on it. You know what I'm saying? Going to the queer shops that you've heard of, through word of mouth or people's little studios or whatever, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I work at a studio in Echo Park in Los Angeles, called Angel Kisses, and everybody there is QPOC owned. We are all queer adjacent POC or femme leaning, like minority tattoo artists. And of course, like, although we do advertise ourselves as like QPOC owned and operated, that doesn't necessarily mean that, obviously we're not going to turn anybody away at the door. But I do see in our clientele, a lot of the people who come just happen to be of that community. And the people who come in, some of them just haven't gone to a space like that before. They didn't realize that spaces like these exist, because, even though I think tattooing has turned much more, like the air and the environment surrounding tattooing has turned like more into, I guess, an expression of one's art in like a very, like, people's art styles just have like exploded, with the advancements in like tattoo technology and just like people saying, hey, I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want, and then like if you like it, get something from me. But it like surprises me how many people that I get and they just say, yeah, I didn't think I would actually have a good time here. I thought I was going to have to like put on this face, dress a certain way and walk into this space and feel very vulnerable. But thank you so much. I've gotten emails being like, thank you for creating this space. And they ask for referrals of different tattoo artists because they felt so safe and they want somebody else later in the future to get something else from. So I do think that there is still a web. There still is like this referral process going, this word of mouth. If you can't find it on, again, like I don't want to plug Instagram anymore because Jesus, I sound way too much like a Gen Zer when I say that. But I do think, word of mouth has kind of turned into, you can find people who follow each other, and it's become much more accessible, which has been very nice to see recently. Very empowering.
I mean, Ryan, that is, our new way of word of mouth. Instagram.
100%.
Right?
Yeah. That's the word of mouth now. I know. No, it's amazing. So, and I'll, chime in as little as possible. I always kind of talk a lot, but I want it to be about y'all. But I have gotten a ton of people reach out to me. One of my interns came to me because he literally filled out the contact form on Tatted's website and said, I'm gay and I have never, ever felt comfortable in a tattoo studio, ever. So I want to work for you. Is there anything I can do? And I've actually gotten that a couple times, is people just offering to work for Tatted for free because they are part of this community and haven't ever, been able, unfortunately, to find that safe space, right? So, it's amazing to hear that it's, ever increasing and that there are these forums and these networks, but it's obviously still necessary to have a loud voice about it because obviously it's not reaching absolutely everyone, and I want it to reach absolutely everyone that needs that, right? And it's part of the reason why we're on this call today. So I want to move quickly into, and I know we're like already pressing time. I want to be respectful of your time too, but we've talked a lot about creating sort of those safe spaces and environments and moments, right, with clients or for artists that work for you or whatever else it is, sort of in your own world or your own shops. I would love to envision, obviously just very ambitiously, a world where it's not only sort of within these sort of network points, but it can be in almost any, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be in every single shop you walk into, but in almost every shop you walk into, it's a welcome space. And it doesn't mean that everyone that works there is LGBTQ, but as an LGBTQ person, you're not sitting there having to pick out of 10% of the shops and do all your research beforehand and do all of that in order to even feel confident, even walking through the door of one. Like, is there worlds like that can exist in the future? And, if so, and I'm hoping yes, if so, but if so, what are the changes that need to be made to get there? It's a big question. How do you save the world? But if there's any thoughts on how to move closer to that, I would love to hear them.
That's so
yeah. I was going to say, one thing I say a lot is, I think this is my Achilles heel, but I also think that it makes me a much better artist or a human being. But empathy is definitely a huge thing that I think about. I think obviously as queer individuals who have lived through oppression and, POC or any minority leading status, you live through oppression firsthand. And I think that lived in experience can really take you, it really does help you understand other people, or really does help you sympathize or empathize with another human being, especially, one of your clients. And, moving forward, I would love to see more empathy. Everybody likes to say peace on this earth and stuff like that. But I do, when I interact with, the traditional cis white male, I see a lot of that cognitive dissonance within there's less empathy there because there's less oppression that one has to face. And obviously that's not their fault, but understanding where individuals come from, understanding what it might be like for that person who walks through the front door, and taking that into your own life and thinking within yourself, how can I make this individual's experience as good as it can be? Because at the end of the day, for us as tattoo artists, you have 3 to 4, sometimes even more clients come through the door every single day. But most likely for that individual who's walking in the door, that's their one thing that they were looking forward to the whole entire day. Or that's the one thing that they they're getting a tattoo today. And it's probably the first one in months or weeks that they're getting, maybe a couple days, I don't know. But, it is a special moment to them. And I forget that a lot. And I have to constantly remind myself, and making sure that their moment, taking space for yourself, but understanding that it probably is special to them, it is something that I hope that most artists do. And I would like to see that more. Yeah. not to ramble, but
I think it would be interesting if like it was all right. So you know how like when you're getting your driver's license, there's like, oh, you got to take like the video of, like defensive driving and blah blah blah, or like there's certain jobs where you have to watch certain videos like to train you in certain things. I think it would be interesting if like during internships or if like just working at certain shops, if something was created to kind of like train people to kind of be like, hey, just be aware, like you might get these are the types of clients you might get, and this is things that you should keep in mind while while you're dealing with these clients. So I think that would be kind of cool. And that was something that we could start incorporating into shops, or just like even moving forward when we're doing any sort of apprenticeship or teaching other people, passing on that knowledge, just letting them know, like, because I feel like I didn't do a traditional apprenticeship, but I did have other artists that I was learning under, and I do feel like that was one thing that wasn't addressed. Like they taught me all the technical shit, a lot of drawing stuff. It was always like, do these exercises, do this technique. And it was just a lot of mastering technique, technique, technique. But one thing that I felt was left out was like sometimes like even just dealing with different skin, or just dealing with people in general, customer service. And I feel like the only reason I was able to kind of like tie both of those things together was because I have experience in like retail and dealing with customers. But if I didn't, I wouldn't know like how to interact with these people or even how to make them feel comfortable. So I just think that's something that should be normalized to like talk.
Such a good point. That's such a good point. I haven't heard of anything even close to that would train on that. And there's, I mean, almost any other sort of training that you get, right? If you have an HR, like there's no HR department for tattooing.
Right.
Like if you're sexually harassed, there's no one to go to. And there's also no, on the job training. Like if you work for, a corporation, you have to go through sexual harassment training, and you have to go through, sort of all these other steps of understanding like what is professionalism and like blah blah blah, like what I mean. So it's never only technical when you have to train for any other type of job. Like it would be amazing if that was adopted somehow in tattooing or in mentors or in sort of apprenticeships, sort of commonly, that they talk about all those other things like incorporating empathy. And about tattooing different skin tones and all of those really important factors. I haven't heard of that, unfortunately, but I would love to see that.
Well, tattooing is not really seen as like a career. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's seen as this thing you're like doodling on people and then or whatever. But if you're working and you're doing this work for over 20 some years, what career do you have, if you're like a doctor or something like that, where you earn, you pay to have this education and then you do it for 20 some years, you would have a lot of respect, right? But with tattooing, you don't. And as you're aging, it's also a thing. If you're a person of color, it's also a thing. It's like you're taking down these like notches, with your experience, with your color, with your whatever the fuck, are you a girl, are you a boy? You know what I'm saying? Like all of these notches that you're taking down. But when it comes down to it, like you do have a lot of experience and that counts for something. And that is your education in a sense, and you do learn a lot by trial and error. Like maybe next time I won't, do this on this person, what I'm saying? In a lot of ways, you do learn that on the job. You do learn that, sometimes in apprenticeships, like the shop culture. I mean, I've had a couple of apprentices at my shop, and a lot of it sometimes is just like, yeah, just sit down with me and talk to this person. They're having a really hard time. And how do you soothe that person? How do you like ground that person? How do you push people a little bit so they can get through an outline? I don't like to do that. If you're having a hard time, let's just stop. But sometimes it's just like a little bit more, and you're wanting to push a person just a little bit so they can finish this little piece, And a lot of that is, I believe, is learned by working and by doing, little secrets that people tell you, like piece of tape over your belly button, or for instance, like I always face people away from me when I'm tattooing them. So if I'm tattooing an arm, I usually lie people down and I make people face away from me and not belly to belly, because that's a really intense energy exchange, you know? And so I could still be there. I'm doing the piece. It doesn't matter. I'm just following a line. It doesn't matter if the piece is backwards or forwards to me, you know? And you do learn a lot of those things, and people do share little secrets with you sometimes like that, you know?
That's amazing. No, it's amazing because you're right. It is a career. It's a real career. It's a real career path. If you've been doing it for over 20 years, what else are you going to call it, to be really honest? And it's not like we want to bring this sort of like, you know, archaic corporate infrastructure to it. That's not what we're trying to do. But a lot of the conversations I have, you know, personally in my tech world is like tattoo artists are artists. They're artists. You need to respect them as you would respect the art that you pay a lot of money to put on your wall, Mr. VC guy. You know what I mean? Like this is real stuff. This is what it is, you know, and it's a beautiful form of expression that I've been obsessed with since the day I can even remember ever having seen a tattoo, you know? So I do love people that take it seriously. And, you know, everyone on this call is obviously incredibly dedicated to their work and also to the industry, right? And so I love to see those energies here, which is fantastic. A lot of great tips, Wolf. That's really great. And you're right. You know, I think as a tattoo artist, you have to have a really acute sort of sense of another human, of the human across from you, right? So like I've been in the middle of a tattoo and in a moment where I don't think I'm giving any tells that I'm in like the peak of pain, they'll be like, "Are you okay? You all right?" They can tell when I'm, you know, when I have my stress points. They can tell if I'm comfortable. They can tell, you know what I mean? And there is that, again, it's sort of this unspoken skill set and this very personal touch that I can only imagine has to be done by experience. And it's really special.
So when people, you know, are upset that you're charging them so much, or you're shaving time off of the hour, you know, or those 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Think of it that way. Think of all the training that goes into that moment. Grounding a person, all of this, when you're shaving off those 15 minutes of the space that you're paying rent to be in, all the supplies, all of that is really, those 15 minutes are worth something, and you have to value your time.
Yeah.
Other people will value your time as well, you know. Right.
It's not purely transactional all the time, or not for everyone, and not for me, you know. So this has been fantastic. Before we leave, if there's any, you know, is there any additional thoughts that anyone didn't get a chance to share, or, you know, wants to leave the room with it all? We covered a lot. No, I always want to give the opportunity in case there was this, you know, this burning moment that someone didn't have. But no, this has just been so special and so enlightening. And I want to thank each of you for sharing your insights and your experience and, you know, a piece of your energy and your person with me and with everyone here. It's really incredible. And you know, for me as the founder, founder CEO, I always put it in air quotes. I can't even say it. I just don't feel like it. You know, I'm always so heads down. I can't. I'm always so heads down in my work. So whenever I get to actually have face to face with y'all and with the community, it's why I'm here, and it really invigorates me, and it gets me so excited. It makes me so happy. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope you all get to connect after this. And I was telling people, Wolf, that I'm, you know, actually going to be over on the West Coast. I'm between the West Coast and New York. So I'll let everyone know where I am, because, you know, I'd love to sit down and have a coffee or something, and even get to know you guys even better. So have an amazing rest of your evenings, and hopefully we'll see each other soon.
Good to meet everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.